Good morning. I'm going to ask you to do something if you have the ability to do so. That is, find a piece of paper that you can write on and something to write with. I meant to give you some paper before, but I just so busy I forgot. So if you've got a piece of paper, scrap paper, whatever, uh, get that out and something to write with. I would go get you some, but I ain't got time for that. So I'm gonna give you a minute to do that. It's good to see you. Uh, I've been looking forward to this. I'm excited about being here. Um, So, but we're just be gathering that together, and we'll be using it in just a couple of minutes. Okay? All right. It's no secret that I love the mountains. I love going up to the Smoky Mountains and hiking on the trails and exploring and things like that. And I can't stop myself. Every time I go up there, I have to wander through the cemeteries. I know it seems a little creepy, but I just love wandering through the cemeteries because you look and you see these old tombstones of people that lived 100 plus years ago, some in the 1800s, some in the early 1900s, and you see some of these tombstones, and I can't help to look at them and notice some of them that are little children that died. Maybe the birth date and the death date is the same day, or maybe they were 5 years old or 3 years old or whatever. And then you come across some where there's three or four children that all died very young of the same family. And I can't help but to think about that and and feel the grief for that family and imagine what they must have gone through during this time when losing these kids. And then I see some of them with the adults, I see them there, the ones that had lived a pretty good life. And what I notice is that every one of them, their life is reduced to a beginning date, a birth date, a death date, and a dash in the middle. You ever notice that? Seems like every one of them's got that. And I look at the birth date and the death date, and I like to calculate how old they were and how long that dash lasted. And then I think, what was their life about? I mean, this was a human. It's not just a display, it's not just a decoration. This was a human being. What was their life about? What were their dreams? You know? What were their uh, what were their mistakes? What were their regrets? What were their victories? How did they treat their family? Those types of things. What did they do for a living? And all I can do is wonder, you know. I don't know, but I think about that. Everything about that person is represented in that little dash between the two dates. I'm going to ask you to do something. You got your pen and paper, hopefully. I'm going to ask you to draw a picture of a tombstone. It doesn't take much of an artist to do that. It can be square, it can be round at top, it can be any shape you want it, but draw a very simple tombstone. I'll give you a second to do that. I don't expect miracles. Now, here comes the fun part. Write your name at the top of it. Not over the top of it, but on it. Put your name on it. Let me give you an example. Put your name on it, and on the left side, put the year you were born, or you can put your entire birthday. That'll be okay. If you don't want some people to see that, then, you got a problem. But put your birth date on the left, put a little dash in the middle, and put 20 blank blank, because we don't know what that date's going to be yet, right? But it's probably going to be 20 blank blank, unless you're really, really young, in which case you're probably not drawing this anyway. Now, we don't know that ending date. And now, look at your picture. It's a little creepy, isn't it? When I made this slide, I thought, that's a little creepy. But it's something we need to think about. Now, look at your tombstone, okay? Look at your tombstone. I want you to notice everyone's tombstone is going to be very similar, because every one of them is going to have a date on the left-hand side, right? Either a year or an actual birth date, whichever you chose to put. And we all have one of those. We've all got one. I mean, that's the date. If you put the whole date, that's the date we like to celebrate with candles and cake and gifts and things like that, right? And be with family or whatever. So everybody's got one of those. We all have a date on the left. And you know that we're all going to have a date on the right. We just don't know how to fill that in yet. No one here knows exactly when to fill that in, right? But we all have the start of one. We know it's there. It's inevitable. So we got a first date and a second date. Now, we don't have any control over that first date, do we? We had no control over when we were born. And for the most part, we don't have any control over that second date. I know some could say, well, I could kill myself, but let's not go there. We don't have control over the second date, do we? The only thing that we actually have control over is that little dash in the middle. We've got complete control over that, don't we? These are the years between your birth and your death. So my question this morning, as you look at your particular tombstone, I've got one for example, but you don't need to care about mine. You need to look at yours. I want you to concentrate, even circle if you want to, that dash in the middle. It represents the years between your birth and your death. So my question is, how are you spending your dash? How are you spending your dash? Now understand, you only get one dash. Nobody gets two. I've done some major research on this, and I've been to lots of cemeteries. I live next to a cemetery and walk in it sometimes, and I've lived in a cemetery, the house I lived in before. And you know the house I lived in before that? I sit out on my back deck, and I can see a cemetery. And I've been to a lot of them in the Smokies and a lot of them in different places. And I've gone and seen a lot of tombstones. And one thing I've noticed in my research is that not a single one of them has two dashes. We only get one. This morning, this moment is really the time for you to deal with the question, because life goes by so quickly, doesn't it? You know, if you're young, you don't realize it, but the older you get, like me, you start to realize, man, where did it go? Where did it go? And you realize you're getting closer and closer to the right side of that little bitty dash, if you can imagine that. And so, you know, it goes by quickly. In fact, let's look at how, I don't know if you can read that. Let's look at how God describes your dash. In James 4:14, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. The psalmist shares thoughts. In Psalm 102, verse 3, my days are consumed like smoke. Psalm 144, verse 4, man is like a breath. His days are like a passing shadow. And then we can even ask Job his thoughts. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. They go really, really quick as they weave. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttles, and they are spent what? Without hope. Raise your hand if you know the date that you'll no longer be on this earth. No hands? We don't know. We don't really know the date. But according to these verses that we just shared, it'll be here before you know it. You know, I think about the James passage in the vapor. Have you ever watched steam? You're like you're boiling something over the stove and you got some water boiling. Hopefully you don't burn it like I do. But you're trying to boil water, and when you see the steam come up, what happens to it? It doesn't fill the house, does it? It just dissipates. It's just gone in a flash. It doesn't linger. Steam doesn't linger. It just dissipates. The vapor is gone. Now, we don't get to decide when we're born. We don't get to decide when we're going to die, presumably. The only thing that we can decide is how we spend our dash, correct? Everybody agree with that? Okay. And that's the one thing that we actually have a choice about. That's the one thing that we can control. We couldn't control the other stuff. We can control this. So the question is, are you living your dash, your life? Are you living it, or are you wasting it? How are you spending your dash? And I understand you've probably heard this concept. This is not a new concept. I didn't make this up. Okay, this thing about the dash. It's not a new concept. But the first time I heard it, I was very young. I was a young man, and I still remember the day that I heard that, and who was speaking when they said it. And it has stuck with me for all these years because it made so much sense that I can control that little dash, and that dash is all I've got to work with, right? And it meant so much to me, I wanted to share it with you. Because some people get to the right-hand side of that dash. Look at you got a little dash. It's not even all that long. It's a very small dash. But some people get to the right-hand side of that dash, and they look back and they get older and they say, I wasted it. I wasted it. All those years gone. I'm not really sure how or why it happened. It just happened. Can you imagine spending your life, living your life, and looking back and realize it just happened? You didn't really control it. You didn't really do anything with it. You just muddled through it. You know? God never intended for you to live your life in fast forward. And that's how I feel like some of us will live our lives. We're so busy, the rat race and stuff. It's almost like we're living in fast forward. You ever hear a song or something and you put it in fast forward? You ever hear how it sounds? And that's how I feel like. Sometimes I feel like that's how our life is. It's like it's going along smooth, and all of a sudden it goes. It's fast forward, and you finally get to the other end, and the song's over. You get to the other end, and the life's over. And you say, I missed it. I missed it. God never intended for us to live our lives in fast forward and miss out on the things that really matter. He wants us to use our dash for Him. Okay? We need to understand that and remember that. I want you to understand, and we've talked about this, but we're here for a purpose. Listen to the purpose. For we are His workmanship. This is Ephesians 2:10. For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Okay? Now, you were created to do what? Good works. What good works? The good works that God has prepared for you. God didn't prepare a bunch of evil stuff for you. He didn't prepare fast forward for you. He didn't prepare a rat race for you. He didn't prepare a gerbil in a wheel kind of life. He prepared good works for you to do. And Paul says that is our purpose. We were created in Christ for that purpose. Now, here's something that we need to understand as we talk about this, because we talk about that's your dash on your piece of paper, right? That's your dash. It's not my dash. It's not somebody beside you. It's your dash, right? But I want you to listen to what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 20. For you were bought at a price. Think through this. You were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. Now, did you catch what Paul says there? Right? He said, glorify God in your body, in your spirit, which are whose? God's. What Paul just said is that your dash is not your own. It belongs to God. Now, I know I falsely said a minute ago, that's your dash, that's your dash, your dash, your dash on your piece of paper. That's your dash. No, it's not. It belongs to God. Your life belongs to God. My life belongs to God. Our dash is not our own. I want to share with you a story this morning. I'm not going to put it on the screen. If you'd like to read with me, you're welcome to. It's in Matthew chapter 25, just to let you know. If you just want to listen, I'm good with that. But in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30 is where this story is found. And in these verses, it's a parable of Jesus. And in these verses, we see at least 3 reasons why your life and what you do with your life matters to God. Okay, you ready? Okay, Matthew 25. I'm going to begin reading in verse 14, and we'll go for a little while through about verse 18. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 talent, or 1, went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. Now let's just stop there and evaluate and think about this. Because the first thing that we learn here is that what we do with our life matters to God, because your life is a gift from God. Okay? You remember what we just read a moment ago, that our life, we were to glorify God in our body and in our spirit, which belong to who? To God. Okay? So it's a gift from God. Now, in this parable, who does the master represent? Huh? God. Okay? I just want to make sure we know who all the players are here. In the parable, the master represents God. Who do the servants represent? Us. Okay, so far the players are God and us, right? Okay. Now, one thing that Jesus is letting us know that God has given us great gifts. Okay? Now, uh, the master has given these three a lot of money, you know, and he gives the first one 5 talents, the second one 2. The talents is a measure of money. He gives 5, 2, and then the third one he gives 1 talent. Now, up until this point, these guys are just your average servants going along, nothing special. But with a single act, the master changed their lives. He gives them money that they can put to work with. So the first servant, right? The first servant, realizing that he's been given a great opportunity, he immediately goes to work and does what? Makes 5 more talents, right? He doubles his money. He doubles what he had been given. Okay? The second one does the same. He sees the major opportunity he has, and so he goes and he works with it, and he makes 2 talents. What'd the third guy do? He just buried it. He just stuck it in the ground. He just put it in the ground, didn't do anything with it. Now, we've got to remember, that this is a parable, right? So the money has to represent something. That's how parables work. Okay? So we've got the master that represents God, we've got the servant that represents us. Now, what does the money represent? Huh? Reaching out to others? What else? Abilities? What else? Huh? Potential evil? Okay. Church? What else? Opportunity? Opportunity? Okay. It represents our mind, our heart. It represents our abilities, our opportunities, right? It represents your life, your dash. Okay? So everything's represented here in this story. And when we realize what we have been given, we need to immediately take advantage of it. We need to live our dash well. Would you agree with that? I mean, there's nothing I just said that's not, it's like, oh, yeah, sure. Now, whether we do it or not, that's different. But we need to live our dash well. But many people just bury it. Many people just bury it, like the guy in the picture. God has given precious gifts, and we just bury it. We don't do anything with it, right? So many people, as they live their lives in fast forward, they just go through life and they've buried it. Listen, we don't need to let life just pass us by. And the older I get, the more I realize this, and especially to some of you that are younger than me, which is most of you. But the closer I get, the more I realize we can't just let this pass by, you know? Um, we need to live intentionally. Not just let it happen. A while ago, it's like life just went by. I don't know how it happened. It just happened. No, 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 no. We need to live life intentionally. We need to do the things that we do in our lives intentionally for a purpose. What is that purpose? To glorify God in our body and in our spirit. We were created for the purpose of what? Good works that God prepared for us. And so we need to live intentionally as we reflect the glory of God. And again, the older I get, the more I realize how fast this life just kind of has gotten away from me. Because I look back, and some of you that are older can look back and say, what happened? You know? I realize how fast it's gotten away from me and how I don't need to waste what God has given me. And so here's the thing we need to realize. It doesn't matter how old you are. Okay? It doesn't matter how old you are. If you haven't lived your life intentionally, start now. Okay? Whatever I've done in the past 62 years of my life does not matter. Whatever you've done in your past, it does not matter. You can't fix that. You can't change that. You can't do a thing about that. But wherever you are on your little dash, from here out, start now because you can control it. Quit living in fast forward. Don't let that happen to you. Live it intentionally. Because what you do with your life matters, because it is a gift from God. It didn't just happen. We didn't just appear. Your life is a gift from God. The second thing we can learn from this story is because God is returning, our life matters to us because our, our life matters because God is going to return to settle accounts. He's going to return. In fact, verse 19 says, after a long time, the Lord of those servants, the Lord of the servants, God, the Lord of the God of us, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. This says the master is coming and he's going to settle accounts. Now, this is something that I guess the one talent man just forgot or never even thought about. Well, I've got this money. What do I do with it? And never thought, I'm going to be held accountable for what I do with this. It says he came to settle accounts. With them, it's accounts about money. With us, it's our life. We are held accountable for how we spend that gift of God or what we do with it. And so the one talent guy, I hate calling him the one talent man, the man that was given one talent, we put a label on him, he just didn't do anything with it, wasted it. Or maybe like so many of us, he just convinced himself that he would eventually get around to doing something good with that, when things settle down. It's funny how people say, "Oh, yeah, when things settle down, I'll do this." When my kids are grown and out and I can kind of settle down, yeah, I'll finally have time. In other words, when life quits going in fast forward, let me tell you something. If you don't control it, life will never quit going in fast forward. It'll never stop. You have to control that. One day God will settle accounts with me and with you. And what we did with our life matters. Amen? What we did with our life matters. Have you buried your abilities? Your opportunities? Have you buried the life that God has given you? I mean, think about your life. This is your tombstone. It's your dates. It's your dash. Are you living your little dash on your paper? Are you living it in fast forward? Most of us are guilty of that. It's just rush, 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 Man, I'm just so big. But rush, 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 rush. Fast forward. And we didn't hear what the song was all about. You ever try to watch a movie and fast forward? You can't tell what's going on. It's just a blur. You ever tried to look at your life and fast forward? You don't know what's going on. It's just a blur. You know? But we need to understand, I want you to understand this morning and really think about this. The Lord has given you, the Lord has given you everything you need to accomplish and fulfill the purpose for which you were created. What is that purpose? You remember? To do good works that God has prepared for you. And you're not missing anything. He's given you everything you need. If you have a Bible in your lap, you've got it. If you have a phone in your lap with a Bible app, you've got it. He's given you everything that you need, including a heartbeat, to accomplish the things that you were prepared to do. Everything. The master's coming back. He's going to settle up with everyone. Everyone. CEOs, presidents, kings, queens, mommies, daddies, plumbers. Doesn't matter. Rich, poor, young, old. He's coming to settle accounts. And it doesn't matter what our achievements are in life as far as what we became. What matters is how we conducted ourselves while we were doing it. You know? It doesn't matter whether whether we became president of the United States or a plumber or an electrician. And plumber's a good, I'm just talking about full blue-collar worker or whatever. It doesn't matter. Whether I'm a stay-at-home mom, that would be tough for me, or Mr. Mom, or dad, or whatever. Whether I've got a lot of money or whether I've got none of that matters. What matters is how I conduct myself, how I live my life, and the faith that I put in God, and to make sure that I live intentionally to live for glorifying God and doing His good works. Let's go a little further in the story. Oh, yeah. I'm going to pick up in verse 20. So he who had received the 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew that you were a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. Let's just stop there a minute. I want you to notice the first 2 guys that were being accountable, that came to the Lord. The first 2, the Lord, they got the same response to the Lord. Well done. Look at your dash. Well done, good and faithful servant. But the guy that had 1 talent, what did he do? He started making excuses, didn't he? Oh, we're good at making excuses, aren't we? I can make excuses like nobody's business, you know? I mean, we're good at that. So he started making excuses. Like so many of us, this guy is attempting not to take responsibility for how he used his life. Does that sound familiar? We don't want to take responsibility for what we did or didn't do. We want to blame someone else. The reason I didn't do this is because of you. It's your fault. That's why I didn't do anything. That's why I just buried your gift. Isn't that what he just said? He told the master, God, it's his fault. He was making excuses. But look, let's pick up verse 26 and see how well that went for him. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers. And at my coming, I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who has not, who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Wow. Just because I buried stuff in the ground? Wow. The master is letting us know it does matter how we live our dash. It does matter how we live our life. What we do with our life matters to the Lord. It matters to the lost world who is out there groping around the world and fast forward and need our help. It matters to them. It matters to us. It matters to the Lord. It needs to matter to you. It needs to matter to me. It should have mattered to this guy with one talent, but it didn't. And I want you to notice something, and this is very real. I want you to notice something. Notice that this man is judged. He's not judged for doing bad things. He's not judged for the evil things that he's done. Rather, he's judged for doing nothing. That's sobering. That's eye-opening. I mean, you think about it. He didn't steal. He didn't embezzle. He didn't defraud. As far as I know, he didn't cheat on his wife. None of that stuff. He merely buried his gift. He failed to live his dash well. You know, the fact that God comes down so hard on him for simply not doing anything has always troubled people, and I can understand that. But he didn't really do anything bad. He's not a murderer. He's not a thief. He's not a child molester. He's not whatever, ever. He's not that bad. And it kind of bothers people sometimes that God was so hard on him. And yet, we know that what we do with our life matters to God because our life is a gift from God. And so what we do with it matters because God will settle accounts. The third thing that we learn, the last thing that I'm going to mention to you, is that our life matters. What we do with our life matters because God is returning to reward those who do his will. What did the master say? Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. And watch this. What did he say? What did he say? Come share in the Lord's happiness. Come share in the joy of the Lord. To get to that point, to get to where the master says to you at the end of your dash, well done, good and faithful servant. Come enter into the joy of the Lord. Enter into the happiness with the Lord. You're going to have to overcome some stuff, aren't you? I mean, let's be real. Life is full of challenges. Life is full of temptations. Life is full of problems. And we're going to have to overcome some stuff, aren't we? That's why I love this verse that I'm about to show you. In Revelation, I don't know if you can read it. In Revelation chapter 3 and verse 21, listen to this carefully. To him who overcomes, this is the Lord speaking, to him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. You think that you got it bad because you got to overcome some stuff? Jesus had some stuff to overcome, didn't he? They ridiculed him. They spat on him. They beat him. They rejected him. His own creation rejected him. They put a crown of thorns thrust on his head. They beat him to that would have killed most anyone else. They drove nails in his hands and his feet, all to purchase you. And all the time going through all of this, he was on the cross. He's hanging there, suffocating, dying. You know what he said? Father, forgive them, for they don't understand what they're doing. Jesus said, just as I had to overcome, you need to overcome. Just as when I overcame, I got to sit on the throne with my Father, I promise you, if you overcome, you think you got problems, look at what Jesus overcame. He lived his dash well. Okay? He says, if you overcome, he will promise that you get to sit on his throne. Isn't that amazing? See, the Lord Jesus is not asking you to do something that he hadn't already done himself. It's not like he's sitting on his throne in his deity, never having faced what we face. He was willing to do it. And he lived his dash well. He said, you'll be rewarded for that. Now, I don't know about you, but ever since I first heard this concept about the dash, it always meant a lot to me. It kind of stuck with me, as I said before. It just sort of stuck with me. And it motivates me. I hope it motivates you. But I want to close with an idea, and I want you to concentrate on this, okay? I want you to pretend, I want you to imagine that your life is over. Now, I don't want to get creepy here, okay? Whatever. Imagine that you're at the end of your dash, your life is over. And this happens. You're taken to a room with two chairs. One chair is for you. One chair is for God. Imagine sitting down face to face with God. So you're sitting there in this room. Your dash is over. You're face to face with God. And miraculously, because God can do this, a DVD appears. And it has your name on it. And the DVD has the title, Your Name, What Could Have Been. What could have been. Written, directed, and produced by God Almighty. And he puts that DVD in. Imagine watching what God wanted you to do with your life if you had only let him. Imagine watching that. If you would have stopped living your life and fast forward, what would it have looked like? Imagine seeing the lives that you could have touched. Imagine seeing what God could have done with your finances if you had been uh, generous with your money to give to others, to give to the church, just to give, and trusted Him that you would be taken care of. Imagine what He could have done for you. Imagine seeing what He might would have done with your character if you had confessed sin and attempted to grow. What you do with your life matters. Now, the good news about the DVD is not completely written yet. Yours is still being recorded, right? It's not written yet. It doesn't have to be what you might have, what would you might have accomplished, what you might have done. It could be different. There's still time for you to live your dash well, to live your life intentionally. And I'm gonna close with this verse because this verse is very meaningful. I want to share it with you. It's in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. Let that sink in a minute. Paul says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, you know what he did with his life. He's a prisoner right now because he was a Christian. I beseech you, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. He says you were called for a purpose. Ephesians 2:10 that we looked at a minute ago. You were called for a purpose. I beseech you. I encourage you. Walk worthy of that which you've been called. You've been called for a purpose. Walk in it. Walk in it. One more time. I therefore beseech you, or the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. Are you a Christian this morning? Are you living it intentionally? Or is your life just fast forward? We can make adjustments. Oh, prayer does a wonderful thing. We can pray together. We got to slow our lives down and put what's important first. Then let all that other stuff just fall into place. I know we need to make a living, okay? The Bible tells us to make a living for our family. I know we need to make a living. I know we need some recreation here and there. But man, what have we done? Our whole life is about making money and how much we can make. We don't just want enough, we want more than enough. And we want an abundance. And we're willing to live our lives and fast forward to where we get to the end. We look back and say, what happened? What happened? Listen, if you're not a Christian, you need to become a Christian now. Your dash it's not going to get any shorter or any longer. Excuse me. It's not going to get any longer. You got to start where you are. You got to start where you are. If you're a Christian and you found yourself, the explanation just makes sense that your life is just fast forward and you don't know what's going on and everything, and you're just like, man, I don't have time to read my Bible. What? You don't have time to read God's word, the one that gave you the gift of life? I don't have time to go to church. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for this. I don't have because we're in fast forward. We're in this whirlwind and we can't get out of it. Let us help you out of that. I can't help you. God can help you. I can only help you pray to God. If there's anything, yes, ma'am.